Every single day, you are, constantly consuming information to make decisions. Like you check the weather app to see if you need a jacket or
Right, or glancing at traffic reports to pick the best commute.
exactly. You read a dozen reviews before buying a new coffee maker. You gather clues, you process them, and you act. But imagine, just for a second, that the stakes aren't whether you get caught in the rain.
Yeah. Imagine the stakes are like a major attack on your city's power grid.
Right. How do you process millions of scattered, often contradictory clues before a disaster strikes?
It's a monumental challenge
Hmm.
because people usually picture national security as this lone spy in a trench coat or, some silent satellite orbiting in space.
It's out of a movie.
Exactly. But in reality, it's a massive industrial scale information processing machine. And that machine is constantly struggling to adapt to threats that it was, frankly, never originally built to handle.
Which is exactly why we're doing a deep dive into the source material today. We really want to understand the core engine of that machine, something called the intelligence cycle.
Yeah, the mechanics of how counterterrorism actually functions on a daily basis.
We're going to explore why this system sometimes misses monumental threats, why it occasionally hallucinates threats that aren't even there, and how local police departments and even private utility companies are trying to rewire this massive federal apparatus for the modern digital age.
Well, to understand the growing pains of this machine, we kind of have to look at its original blueprint. Because the core intelligence process we use today, it was built during the Cold War.
Right.
It was designed to track Soviet tanks, nuclear submarines, bombers, massive, highly symmetrical, incredibly slow-moving military threats.
So it's basically a system built to track a massive, predictable storm front moving across a radar screen.
Right. But modern terrorism isn't a storm front.
No, it's a few self-radicalized individuals building a backpack bomb in a suburban garage. We are essentially trying to predict exactly where a single random lightning bolt will strike based on nothing but, like, the local humidity.
Which is an almost impossible task. I mean, because tactical prediction of specific small-scale terrorist events is so incredibly difficult, the intelligence community has had to shift its entire philosophy.
Okay, so away from predicting the lightning strike.
Exactly. The focus has moved away from purely tactical prediction, like knowing the exact time and place of an attack, toward what we call strategic warning.
Strategic warning, meaning we aren't just trying to catch the lightning bolt as it falls.
Right. Strategic warning is about understanding enemy methods and identifying our own vulnerabilities to mitigate the impact of a disaster. It's really about risk reduction.
Got it.
So if you know a specific terrorist network favors attacking transit hubs, you might not be able to predict which station they'll hit on a Tuesday, but you can harden the security infrastructure of all your stations.
You change the environment.
Exactly. So even if an attack is attempted, the damage is severely limited.
That makes total sense. But to generate that kind of strategic warning, you still have to process a mountain of raw data, and that happens through the intelligence cycle. And from the sources, this isn't just a numbered list in a defense manual. It's like a living, breathing life cycle of information.
It really is. Do you want to lay out the steps?
Yeah, so it starts with planning and direction, which is simply figuring out what questions need answering. Then comes collection, going out and gathering the raw data.
And from there, the raw data hits the processing phase. Because an intercepted radio transmission in a foreign language is completely useless until it's translated or decrypted.
Oh, for sure.
Once it's readable, it enters analysis, where human beings try to actually connect the dots and figure out what it means.
And finally, dissemination.
Right, getting that polished intelligence report into the hands of the person who actually needs to make a decision.
Okay, let's focus on that very first phase, planning and direction. Who's actually asking the questions? Because during the Cold War, the customer for intelligence was the president or, I don't know, a five-star general.
Yeah, it was very top-heavy.
But today, if we're trying to protect the homeland, that customer base is wildly diverse.
The landscape is completely fractured. The people who need strategic warnings today are local police chiefs, public health officials managing biological threats, and crucially, private infrastructure owners.
Oh, right, because they operate everything.
Think about who actually operates the hospitals, the power plants, the water treatment facilities, the transit networks in your city. It is almost entirely the private sector.
So a private utility CEO might desperately need threat intelligence to protect the local power grid from a cyber attack. but they face massive structural barriers.
Huge barriers. I mean, they don't have high-level federal security clearances. They face legal hurdles regarding what data they can even share.
Right, and they're dealing with a federal system designed to aggressively hoard classified information, not hand it over to a regional power company.
Add to that, the flow of information isn't just top-down anymore. Local police aren't just waiting for federal alerts, they're actively directing intelligence gathering.
Like a beat cop.
Exactly. A local beat cop on a routine patrol might notice a strange chemical purchase, or someone repeatedly photographing the security cameras at a water reservoir. Those localized anomalies are often the very first indicators of a broader systemic threat.
But wait, if a private utility company spots a weird digital intrusion, or a local cop notices someone probing a reservoir, how do they actually task a massive bureaucratic agency like the NSA to look into it?
It seems impossible, right?
Yeah, the gap between a municipal beat cop and federal intelligence seems impossibly wide.
Well, bridging that gap requires a highly structured roadmap. The first pillar of that roadmap is centralized guidance with decentralized execution.
What does that mean in practice?
So the federal government creates overarching national priority lists. They don't micromanage, they act as a guide, basically broadcasting, hey, these are the threat indicators we are currently prioritizing globally.
Okay, so the federal agencies provide the map, but the local agencies actually navigate it.
Exactly. And to facilitate that navigation, you utilize Joint Terrorism Task Forces, or GTTFs.
I've heard of those.
Yeah, these are regional hubs where federal agents, state police, and local entities literally sit in the same room. A rural police department might not have a direct line to the CIA, but they have a rep at a regional JPTF who can elevate a local anomaly to a national database instantly.
But what about the private sector? Because a hospital administrator isn't sitting in a JTTF meeting.
Right, and that is where secure networks come into play, specifically systems like the Homeland Security Information Network, or HSIN.
HSIN.
Yeah. Imagine you manage a regional dam. You don't need a top-secret clearance. But through a multi-tiered portal like HSIN, you can securely log an unusual pattern of surveillance around your facility.
Oh, that's smart.
The platform is designed to ingest this private sector data safely, stripping out proprietary corporate info and ensuring it doesn't violate domestic privacy laws before feeding it into the public security apparatus.
Okay, so once everyone agrees on what to look for, the cycle moves to collection and processing, basically gathering the data and making it readable. And from what the sources say, this is where the intelligence community is essentially drowning.
Oh, completely.
They are crashing into a massive tech tsunami.
The digital revolution just completely upended signals intelligence, or SIGINT. Decades ago, wiretapping meant physically clipping a wire onto a landline telephone. Today, we're dealing with voice over IP, encrypted messaging apps, disposable mobile devices.
I want to pause in the encryption piece because we hear terms like AES and PGP thrown around constantly. What does that actually look like for an intelligence agency trying to intercept a message?
Okay, think of Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, like an unbreakable digital envelope. In the past, if an agency intercepted a coded message, they could use massive supercomputers to essentially guess the password.
Like brute forcing the lock until it opened.
Right. But modern encryption algorithms are so mathematically complex that brute forcing them with current technology would take longer than the age of the universe.
Wait, really? The age of the universe?
Literally. Even if an agency perfectly intercepts the data packet as it travels across the internet, all they have is a box they cannot open.
Wow. And it's not just the machines failing to open the boxes. There is a massive human bottleneck as well when it comes to human intelligence, or the human right.
Language barrier.
Exactly. The sources point out that we have literal mountains of intercepted, unencrypted data, audio files, emails, documents, but a crippling lack of people who can actually read them. There's this desperate need for analysts, fluent in Arabic, Farsi, Urdu, and all these regional dialects.
Because language skills fundamentally dictate the accuracy of human intelligence. You need native or near-native fluency to understand nuance, slang, cultural context.
Right.
If an analyst translates a regional idiom literally rather than contextually, it can completely alter the perceived intent of a target. Without that cultural expertise, intelligence gathering is just guesswork.
So we are basically sweeping up millions of locked diaries, and the few diaries we can actually open we can't read because we keep rejecting the locksmiths.
It's a great analogy.
Because after major geopolitical shifts, there are always these massive recruitment pushes for linguists. But historically, an astonishing number, the sources say sometimes up to 90% of applicants are rejected right out of the gate.
And the tragic irony is that those rejections are largely driven by the security clearance process itself.
Really?
Yeah, the individuals most qualified to translate complex, nuanced regional dialects are often foreign-born native speakers. But because they might have family members still living overseas or foreign financial ties, they're flagged as security risks under these rigid Cold War-era clearance frameworks.
So the system prioritizes a spotless domestic background over actual vital linguistic expertise. How does an agency navigate that catch-22?
Well, the sources suggest the most practical solution is expanding special immigrant status programs for translators.
Oh, like what they do for military interpreters.
It's exactly. Similar to programs used in conflict zones, this involves bringing them and their immediate families safely to the U.S., which inherently removes the leverage a foreign entity might have over them, simplifying the background check.
That makes a lot of sense.
It requires a policy shift, though, weighing the hypothetical risk of a complex background against the guaranteed risk of leaving critical threat intelligence untranslated on a server.
Okay, let's assume we navigate that. We collect the data, we bypass the encryption, our newly hired linguists translate it perfectly with all the cultural nuance intact.
A best-case scenario.
Right. Now we hand it to an analyst. And this brings us to the cognitive core of the machine, which is analysis. How do we make sure the human being reading that report doesn't just see what they want to see?
That is arguably the most fragile phase of the entire intelligence cycle, because human cognition is inherently flawed.
I mean, if we look at the two most famous intelligence failures of the modern era 9/11 and the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, they were totally opposite failures of analysis.
Very true.
9/11 was a failure to connect real dots that actually existed, while the Iraqi WMD assessment was a failure where analysts connected imaginary dots due to overwhelming groupthink.
And those twin failures really highlight the constant tension in how we structure analysis. I mean, you can centralize it, pooling all your data in one massive hub like the National Counterterrorism Center, specifically to avoid another 9/11.
Right, everyone brings their puzzle pieces to one giant table so nothing is missed.
Exactly. But the danger of centralization is clientism. These hubs can become information black holes that only produce reports tailored for top-level policymakers, entirely ignoring the needs of the local transit cop.
On the flip side, if you decentralize analysis, having dozens of smaller intelligence units across different states and local municipalities, they're highly agile. They serve their local mayors and police chiefs incredibly well.
But decentralized units risk duplicating each other's efforts. And because they only see a tiny fraction of the overarching threat landscape, they can easily miss the big picture.
And beyond the structural traps, there are mental traps. Analysts are highly susceptible to cognitive biases. One of the major ones mentioned in the sources is bounded awareness.
Yes.
This is where an analyst is so hyper-focused on a specific threat profile that they literally miss vital information happening right in front of their faces because it falls outside their narrow mental framework.
And a related and incredibly dangerous cognitive trap is the type 3 error. Most people know about false positives or false negatives,
Yeah.
but a type 3 error is different. It is perfectly solving the wrong problem.
What does that actually look like in practice for an intelligence agency?
Okay, imagine an intelligence unit spends 6 months brilliantly mapping out a terrorist cell's encrypted communication network. They break the codes, they map the social graph, they perfectly solve the digital puzzle.
Sounds like a success.
But a type 3 error occurs if that cell is actually just a decoy operation, while the real attackers are communicating via handwritten notes slept under a park bench.
Oh,
The agency did perfect analytic work, but they applied it to the completely wrong problem.
that is terrifying. So imagine you're a junior analyst sitting at a desk with thousands of pages of translated intercepts. How do you train your brain to avoid a type 3 error? How do you fight groupthink? Often people suggest devil's advocacy or red teaming, having a group purposely argue the opposite side of a consensus.
Yeah, red teaming is popular in theory, but historically it can backfire spectacularly.
Really? Why?
During the lead-up to the Iraq War, the Office of Special Plans was essentially set up to challenge the intelligence community's consensus. But instead of injecting healthy skepticism, it led to cherry-picking data to fit a predetermined narrative.
Oh,
Furthermore, human psychology plays a huge role here. When analysts feel their hard work is being aggressively attacked by a designated red team, They don't open their minds, they dig their heels in.
They get defensive.
Extremely defensive. They cling to their original assessments even more stubbornly.
So if red teaming just makes people defensive, what actually works for these junior analysts?
The most effective cognitive training involves highly structured, objective tools that remove the emotion from the analysis. One vital technique is morphological analysis.
Walk me through a hypothetical of how an analyst actually uses that.
Okay, morphological analysis forces an analyst to break a problem down into isolated variables. Let's say you are trying to anticipate an attack on a city. You create a matrix.
Like a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Column A is the weapon drone, cybervirus vehicle. Column B is the target water plant, financial server, stadium. Column C is the timing rush hour, midnight during a holiday.
Okay, I'm following.
So instead of trying to guess a specific plot, the analyst randomly combines variable from each column to force their brain to evaluate incredibly weird, unnatural scenarios. What would a drone attack on a financial server at midnight look like?
Oh, that's fascinating.
It forces the mind out of bounded awareness and generates novel strategic warnings.
Another critical mental shift the sources mention for junior analysts is studying what wargamers call blue issues.
Yes, blue issues.
Because in wargaming, red is the enemy and blue is us. Analysts spend years staring at the enemy, obsessing over the red issues, and they forget to evaluate their own side's vulnerabilities.
It happens all the time.
To generate true strategic warning, you have to look at your own infrastructure, your own domestic habits, and honestly ask, if I were attacking us, where is our most glaring blind spot?
It requires a profound level of institutional self-awareness.
Okay, so let's say our junior analyst uses morphological analysis, studies the blue issues, avoids groupthink, and produces a brilliant bias-free threat assessment.
A masterpiece.
That report still has to leave the building, and the dissemination phase is notorious for being a bureaucratic nightmare. The system is culturally designed to hoard information.
It's so true. There is a deeply ingrained culture of ownership within intelligence agencies. When an agency collects a piece of data, they feel they own it, rather than viewing themselves as stewards of information that they owe to the public safety apparatus.
Right. And this manifests in something the sources call originator controls. To put this in everyday terms, imagine you work in a corporate office and you need to share a read-only Google Doc with an intern to finish a project.
Okay?
But the company policy says you literally have to track down the CEO who created the document 3 years ago and get their written permission before you can click share.
It completely paralyzes the workflow.
Now, scale that frustration up to a scenario where a transit cop needs immediate threat data. Add in massive overclassification where everything defaults to a top secret stamp and the data goes nowhere.
And beyond the culture of hoarding, there were massive intentional legal barriers. Prior to 9/11, there was a literal legal wall separating foreign intelligence gathering from domestic law enforcement, originally mandated by the FISA court.
And that wall existed for very good reason, right? It was meant to protect civil liberties, to ensure that the massive surveillance apparatus of foreign spy agencies wasn't turned inward on domestic citizens.
Precisely. But that legal wall also meant that the CIA could know a known foreign terrorist had entered the country, but they couldn't legally pick up the phone and tell the FBI to go arrest them.
Which is insane.
The Patriot Act effectively took a sledgehammer to that wall, legally allowing the sharing of data to prevent attacks.
Which brings us to the ultimate policy critique, the endless tug-of-war between security and civil liberties. Aggressive information sharing between massive federal databases and local law enforcement is highly effective at preventing attacks, but it inherently rubs up against the constitutional right to privacy.
The zero-sum game in many ways.
The more secure you want to be, the more privacy you have to sacrifice. The sources remain impartial on this, but they do point out how different nations handle this balance.
The Netherlands model regarding encryption is a fascinating policy attempt to navigate this. They recognize that outlawing strong encryption globally is impossible.
You can't just ban math.
Right. So rather than forcing tech companies to build permanent backdoors into their software, which weakens security for everyone, they created a legal framework centered on the individual.
How does that work?
If authorities have a proper judicial warrant, they can legally mandate an individual to decrypt their own personal communications. Refusing a lawful order to decrypt your own device is a crime in itself.
Oh, that's an interesting workaround.
It maintains the civil liberty of robust encryption for the general public, while giving law enforcement a targeted legal mechanism to do their jobs.
So, on a practical, day-to-day level, What are the actionable solutions for getting this critical intelligence out of the federal silos and into the hands of a local power grid operator who actually needs it?
The most immediate impactful change is adopting what they call right-for-release policies. Analysts are now trained to write reports using what are called tier lines.
How does a tier line work?
An analyst writes the highly classified, sensitive details like the name of the human spy who provided the info at the very top of the document. Then, below a literal or digital line, they write a sanitized, unclassified summary of the actual threat.
Ah, I get it.
So the essential strategic warning can be instantly torn off from the classified sources and methods and emailed directly to an uncleared local police chief or a private utility manager.
That is brilliant.
Coupled with ongoing efforts to selectively expand security clearances for key state and local officials, it allows the intelligence to actually flow to the people who need it.
Because all the brilliant analysis in the world is useless if the local transit cop or the power grid operator is locked out of the playbook by a top secret stamp. Knowledge only matters if it reaches the person who needs to act.
Absolutely. And this entire cycle of planning, collecting, processing, analyzing, and disseminating, it is not exclusive to us.
Wait, what do you mean?
Modern terrorist groups, specifically decentralized jihadist networks, are actively using this exact same intelligence cycle against modern nations.
They have their own intelligence cycle.
They have their own robust phases of collection and analysis. But because they lack sophisticated spy satellites or massive, legalized wiretapping infrastructure, they've adapted. They become absolute masters of open-source intelligence OSINT.
Meaning they just use what's publicly available.
They mine public data, local news reports, social media posts, open academic papers to meticulously plan their moves and generate their own strategic warnings.
Oh, wow.
While large nations struggle with bureaucratic stovepipes, originator controls, and overclassification, adversarial networks are operating decentralized, highly agile intelligence cycles entirely out in the open.
That completely flips the script. It really leaves you with a critical question to ponder long after we wrap up here in the digital age. Is the ultimate advantage held by the side with the biggest, most heavily guarded secrets, or by the side that is best at processing what is already hiding in plain sight?
It's something we really have to reckon with.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. The next time you check your phone to process information and make a decision, remember the massive, flawed, but constantly evolving machine trying to do the exact same thing on a global scale. Keep questioning the information around you. See you next time.